located at 1 Tacoma Drive, or watch live on Channel 8 and through live streaming on Brookfield's website. The public may also participate in public comment either in person or by calling 855-695-3744 and pressing *3 to be placed in the queue for comment. Please note that if you're calling in for public comment and would like to speak on more than one agenda item, you'll need to press *3 each time to be placed back in the queue for comment. There are 2 items this evening, and the public comment will be limited to 90 minutes. The first 1 through 15 participants in the queue have 3 minutes to speak. The next 16 through 25 participants in the queue have 2 minutes. And if time remains, the next 26 plus participants in the queue have 1.5 minutes to speak. Again, if joining virtually for public comment, the number to call is 855-695-3744 and press *3 to be placed in the queue. Screeners will ask callers for their first and last name, neighborhood, and the agenda item the caller would like to comment on. Please call several minutes before the agenda item and press *3 to ensure you're in the queue for comments. If joining in person, we will ask you to come to the podium and state your name and neighborhood for the record. We will now proceed with tonight's special meeting. The special meeting of the City Council is called to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
Hinkle. Jasirsky.
Here.
Leslie.
Here.
Lim.
Here.
Vincent.
Here.
Marsh. Polshin.
Here.
Schaff.
Here.
Ward.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum is present. Will everyone please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will begin with council's review and approval of this evening's agenda. Does any member of the council have any comments or questions regarding this evening's agenda? Seeing none, are there any objections to this agenda being approved? Seeing none, this agenda is approved. Our first item this evening is a post-incident report regarding the March 12, 2022 fire on the interchange A-pad. Council has a copy of the agenda memorandum, and I'll ask our staff to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Mary, and good evening, council and community. Apparently, Mr. Valdez is ready and eager as he is already at the podium. He is going to walk us through very briefly the incident. We do have North Metro Fire here, as well as COGCC. Andrew will go first. North Metro Fire Deputy Chief Bybee and Chief Ramos are both in the audience, as well as Mike Leonard from the COGCC will follow up. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Andrew.
No, they're calling.
They're calling in. Jake, are we ready? We're good to go. Mayor, with that, Mr. Valdez, please introduce this item to us.
Thank you, Manager Hoffman.
It
No,
sounds
hold on
kind of
just a
low.
minute. Yeah.
Is the audio okay, Jake?
Now it should be on for you.
Hello? There we
That's
go.
better.
All right, good evening, Mayor and City Council. So this is the staff presentation of the March 12th fire that occurred on interchange A-pad. On the screen is outline of the presentation. So I will be giving an overview of the event. Representatives from North Metro Fire are here. They'll give an overview of the emergency response. Then I will give a summary of the root cause analysis and corrective actions that have been identified. And then finally, representatives from the COGCC will run through a number of questions that were posed to the commission staff as a result of this incident. Also joining us tonight is the inspector who responded to the incident, as well as our operational analyst here in the front row.
Andrew, would you introduce those?
Yeah.
Would you introduce them, please, just for our viewing audience?
Absolutely. David Scary is oil and gas specialist. He responded to the event. And Vesta Esson used to be one of our inspectors and now is our ops analyst. Thanks, Vesta. Alrighty, next screen, Jake. Thanks. Alrighty, so here you can see the event timeline as we currently understand it. Broomfield staff, including communications, oil and gas, the city attorney's office, and the city manager's office were able to notify council that the incident was under control and non-emergent within 40 minutes. And the public was notified via the oil and gas via the loop and the city webpage within 75 minutes. Even though this occurred on a weekend, staff was able to put into action some of the feedback we received after the January ECD event. The facts are as follows. At approximately 4:38 p.m. on Saturday, March 12th, a fire occurred on the interchange A-pad, currently in active downhole drilling. Reports from first responders, Broomfield inspectors, and the pad operator indicate that drill fluids ignited at an incinerator due to a blockage at a mud separator unit. The cuttings were sent from the separator to the incinerator, and a pilot flame ignited the fluid, causing approximately 1 barrel of material to burn at the incinerator. The extraction field crews doused the majority of the flames with dirt and fire extinguishers, and when North Metro arrived on the scene, a fire retardant foam called Micro Blaze Out was applied. And this foam is non-PFAS, non-PFOA, biodegradable. And you can see the safety data sheet in your council packets. Operations did not resume until 6 p.m. the following day after corrective measures were implemented, which I'll go into further detail later in the presentation. Extraction also delivered to Broomfield a notification summary of the event per requirements in our agreement. The notification summary is not an analysis of the incident. It's merely a preliminary summary of the facts, including any reports of damage or injuries which did not occur in this event. At this point, I'll turn it over to North Metro Fire to give a response and incident summary.
Thanks, Andrew. Good evening, council, mayor, city staff. My name is Jeff Bybee. I'm the operations chief at North Metro Fire Rescue. As operations chief, I oversee emergency response for the district. Again, with me is the chief of the department, Dave Ramos. As an aside, I've been with the department 37 years and been a resident of Broomfield for almost 30. So we're going to go through a brief timeline of North Metro's involvement in this incident. And I think I'd like to start by orienting you to our standard oil pad site response. So we'll send 4 engines, a ladder truck, 2 medic units, 2 battalion chiefs, a safety and medical officer, a foam truck, and also a water tender. North Metro also covers unincorporated areas of Adams County where their oil facilities don't have water. We're lucky in Broomfield that we have a hydrant, ready hydrants within 1,000 feet of every pad site in along that 470 corridor or Northwest Parkway corridor. So we received the call at 4:40 p.m. And as our crews, they have to bunker up, they got to put their safety equipment on, they get in the engine, and they took off. As they left the station, they reported a small black plume above interchange A. Excuse me. They arrived on scene with a medic unit. There's a medic unit and an engine at that same firehouse. A medic unit is basically an ambulance that also has cross-trained firefighters in it. So 5 people showed up initially within 4 minutes of initial dispatch. When they got on scene, they discovered a small fire just inside the entrance of interchange A, about 6 foot by 6 under what they described as a trailer, which ended up being a mobile incinerator, which I don't know if you guys are going to cover later. Yeah. Okay. They met quickly, per our protocol. They met with the company man there who was in charge, ascertained that all the valves had been shut, drilling had stopped, ignition sources had been removed, and everybody was accounted for. Also, when they arrived, people on site, workers on site, were also actively fighting the fire, the small fire, by just throwing dirt on it with front end loaders and shovels. The fire, according to our initial company officer, was essentially out upon their arrival. They assisted by pulling a bumper line, which is the smallest line we have on our engines, used some of the micro blaze out that Andrew was talking about, foamed the area out, and I think within by 4:51, the event was essentially over. We'll just clean up. During this time, they also hit a hydrant with the people from the medic unit, which we didn't need that water, and performed air monitoring around the site, at least around the vicinity of the fire. I think basically that's about it. We also we do other things to clean up. We picked up our equipment. We made sure that before we left, we used our thermal imaging cameras and made sure that the trailer itself was at 110 degrees. There's no chance of an extra ignition, anything like that. Wrapped up and pretty much exited probably around 5:50. Is that up there? 5:50, I think it's about when our people left. So the entire incident, now we had that entire contingent, a response contingent I spoke of earlier, almost 27 people in all that apparatus. A portion of those people were kept in staging just in case the incident escalates. But we were able to quickly return most of those people back to their normal response districts for other emergency response. One of the things I'd like to say that goes a little bit beyond the actual response is on our district Facebook page, and we had some posts and a website post on why did we call this a small fire when it was at a pad site where there's a lot of hazardous materials, a lot of hazardous processes. And I can assure you, we take these very seriously. We've been training on this stuff for a very long time. It's a small fire because it was small in size. There was no possible extension to nearby structures or flammable materials. And 3 people were able to put it out. A couple people with shovels and 3 people with a very small hose. So that's really kind of the gist of our entire response. We turn it back to you, Andrew. Yeah. Okay.
Hey, Chief. Next slide, Jake. All right. So I was delivered a root cause analysis and after action report late yesterday, and our technical teams now reviewed this and find it to be consistent with ours, North Metro Fires, and COGCC's field verifications and post-event inspections. I'll now summarize the information provided, which is also linked in your council packets. The root cause was a blockage at a mud separator, referred to in the Form 22 as a gas buster. That caused buildup and eventual combustion of about 1 barrel of drill fluid at an incinerator, referred to in the root cause analysis as a combustor. And I've got a diagram that should explain this all on the next slide. Lack of clean out maintenance and more vigilant monitoring of inflow outflow rates of the material also contributed to the event. And I'll be frank with council tonight, these were human errors. These were human failures. There's no other way to state it. Next slide. So these are the simplified diagrams of the process flow. Yeah, that seems to come across. In the previous configuration and under normal operation, drill fluids containing gas, mud, and cuttings come off the drill rig and into the mud and gas separator. Gas is burned off at the incinerator, and mud and cuttings were exited from the separator at a port at the bottom of the vessel. Next slide. So what happened on March 12th was cuttings there at the bottom blocked the exit port and caused the material to build up in the separator and get sent to the incinerator. This material combusted and caused the fire and smoke. Next slide. After the event, additions and modifications were made to the equipment to reduce risk of a similar failure. So number 1, the mud separator outlet was changed to the side of the vessel instead of the bottom of the vessel, so the solids in the cuttings can settle at the bottom and liquids can more easily be exited. Number 2, a 55 barrel capacity containment unit was added between the mud and gas separator and the incinerator, which also has an alarm on it in case anything enters the incinerator other than gas. Number 3, The previous exit port now contains a wash line for maintenance and to ensure free flow of material. Next slide. So on a go-forward basis, the following corrective measures have also been implemented process-wise. Number one, increased maintenance to the mud gas separator. Specifically, every time that the mud and gas separator is brought online or taken offline, and prior to it being put back online, it will be drained and washed out with that washout port that we showed in the previous slide. Second, additional monitoring of drilling mud return lines. So basically, they're going to have somebody monitoring these flow rates in intake and outtake flow rates constantly. And then there's the containment system and reconfiguration of the mud separator, which we already covered. So all of these measures will be observed throughout the rest of the drilling in Broomfield. Next slide. And finally, a number of questions related to state regulatory matters were referred to us to the COGCC. The Deputy Director and Compliance Unit Manager should have called in with us tonight so we can go over these questions. Mike and Scott, are you guys there?
I'm here, Scott Cuthbertson, Deputy Director for Operations for COGCC.
Hi, Scott.
I'm Mike Leonard, the Compliance Unit Manager for COGCC.
Hi, Mike. Thanks, guys, for joining us tonight. So I'll just go ahead and read these questions off, and you guys can respond. Does that sound good?
Certainly.
Sure.
Thanks, guys. Okay, what level of event is required for the COGCC to pull extractions permit?
So this is really hard to talk about hypothetically. The process of revoking a permit is first of all, an Administrative Procedures Act governed process that we would, have to go through that quasi-judicial process that is also subject to overview and appeal by the courts. So, the permit, once issued, confers specific rights to the permit holder, provided they comply with the terms and conditions of the permit. So more often than not, operations cease as a result of an operator failing to maintain compliance with the conditions of their permit, rather than any kind of a procedural process to revoke the permit. Revoking the permit, as I'm sure maybe your attorneys have advised you, I don't know if you've asked or not, but revoking a permit is a significant quasi-judicial process that requires a significant hurdle of evidence to be able to win, quite frankly. So the bottom line, I think, from trying to give you the best perspective I can of whatever might happen in the future, is every permit has conditions that are required to be met, including conditions regarding upset conditions, both conditions of that prevent things and conditions that allow things during upset conditions. So the bottom line is, as long as a permittee complies with the requirements or the conditions of their permit, there's no real legal basis for revoking or rescinding that permit.
Thank you, Scott. And I know COGCC did a follow-up inspection, I believe, on Monday. And were any COGCC rules found to be in violation when that inspection occurred?
Mike, I'll look to you to.
Yeah, no, not at that time. And I can go into when we get a little bit farther down into the questioning, I can talk a little bit about that, but no, there were no violations at that time.
Copy, thanks. All righty, is there any petition process at the COGCC for local governments to use to review the conditions of the permit?
Yeah, so as I know you're aware, the local governments, when the COGCC rules afford all local governments that are proximate to applications for permits to be able to file a petition to participate in that permit review process. And by doing so, they attain party status, which means that, you know, the local government, beyond just providing public comment, has the ability to present evidence and to participate in the examination of the evidence presented by the applicant, and as well as any opposers, depending on whether the local government, is supportive or against the proposed permit. So I think there's a significant level of opportunity for local governments to participate in that, in the proposed permitting process or the hearings process. In addition, once a permit is issued, any person, including local government entities, can file a complaint if they believe that there is a violation of a rule, or even just a matter of concern that they want to express a complaint about. There's an online complaint process that we have a person monitoring full-time and dedicated to respond to. If that complaint is if the director agrees that the complaint represents a violation of the rules, and if that condition of the complaint is an imminent threat, that process is also elevated to the commission, and the complainant is deemed a party to that process and can participate in that commission process. So I think there's really robust opportunities to participate with the commission. Most of the opportunity is proactive, right? In the permit review stage of the process. Like I said, once a permit is issued, changing the conditions or revoking the rights in the permit are a much tougher legal process to pass.
Thank you, Scott. All righty. What was the COGCC's reaction, impressions to the fire, post-fire inspection, and after action report?
No, I'll take that, Scott. I was notified myself from Civitas of the fire shortly after 6 o'clock that evening. They had a pretty good idea of what caused it. They had run that down to note that the bottom of that gas buster had plugged in some way or another, and they were going to shut down until they repaired that or re-plumbed that gas buster to alleviate that situation. We did go out on Monday because they were shut down on Sunday and confirmed that they did re-plumb the gas buster and the clean out line on that buster to make sure that this situation had been mitigated.
All right, thank you, Mike. And last question here. Is there any expectation that we could have that the COGCC could help us enforce essentially a stand down until a root cause analysis is delivered? So in this case, there was about 10 days, 11 days between those two points. Is that something that the COGCC could enforce?
So I guess I would say we never let an operation resume operations until we believe the root cause or the cause of the incident is known and corrected. I appreciate sometimes there is a delay in getting all of the final documents prepared and reviewed and published, which is why we maintain direct conversations with each of the operators and do that assessment in near real time. I don't think that there is a permit condition basis that would allow us to prevent them from resuming operations once we agree with the cause and have evaluated and determined that the corrective measures taken are appropriate. I don't think that there's a permit condition that would allow us to delay or requiring them to delay startup until such time as, all the paperwork was finished and published. I will say that, not all incidents are the same, obviously, right? I mean, we have had occasions when we have had operators who were more or less recalcitrant and had repeat incidents of the same nature, where we have extended a pause on their return to operations until such time as we could do maybe a more in-depth review. Sometimes that is completely appropriate. This incident, while I appreciate it, any incident at an oil and gas location is dramatic, potentially, and I certainly appreciate that. But the type of this incident was a pretty easily discernible cause and correction, and we had an operator who was being very responsive and not resisting, communicating, or they were very forthcoming, they were very participative, they were very responsive. And so I think we were able to get a quick resolution to the incident that would not have supported us, asking for them or telling them to delay startup once we understood and agreed that the right corrective measures had been taken.
And Scott, if I can add, we work very closely with the emergency response agencies in all areas. If they're uncomfortable with something, we want to have that discussion with them to see why they're uncomfortable with it, and then we will also have that discussion with the operator. I've worked with Chief Bybee, not in incidents, but we've worked with each other in through the Front Range Co-op and other issues. But if the local response agency has a problem, and we do have a requirement of having an emergency response plan, then there could be a chance for a pause based on what they're feeling or thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that, Mike. And I hope this is not pedantic, but it is a little complex in that, COGCC is the administrative agent that governs the extraction of the oil and gas. And we have some safety constraints on that, that is within our jurisdiction. But as Mike said, emergency management is the one who's in control during the incident. We all simply report to them and support what their analyses are. And thirdly, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration is the agency who is responsible for the safety of the workers and on site, and the impacts of the site on worker safety and health. So there are several agencies that could be involved in any kind of an incident review, and so COGCC is not the sole arbiter of determining when an operator is allowed to return to operation.
Got it. Okay, thank you, guys. If you gentlemen could hang on just a little bit longer, if any follow-up comes your way, we'd certainly appreciate it, but thank you for those responses. And that concludes our overview of the incident. The rest of the staff and team are here to answer follow-up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Valdez. We'll now proceed with public comments. Does any member of the public have comments on this agenda item? And we'll start with in-person public comment. If there's anyone who would like to be heard, please come up to the podium, state your name and neighborhood for the record, and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Mackenzie Caravan. I live in the Anthem Highlands neighborhood. I just wanted to say thank you for calling this session and allowing residents to speak. I have 2 points that I want to be sure aren't lost in this conversation. The most important point is that these recent fires are not victimless occurrences. Many of us have been suffering the impacts of these industrial oil and gas projects at our doorsteps for years. From chemical exposures to the months of sleep deprivation, from the fracking noise to the evident health impacts on our family, like chronic nosebleeds, eye and throat irritation, and headaches, just to name a few. Residents of Broomfield and Adams County have been living in a state of consistent fear and overwhelming anxiety. Let's not forget that these 3 fires are not isolated incidents. They are part of what I and several of my concerned community members see as a 5-year string of terrorizing events in our neighborhoods. When you add the trauma of the Marshall Fire, watching our neighbors, friends, and families' lives be threatened and homes burned to the ground, it's nothing short of horrifying. There are human faces on the impact of this that need to be acknowledged. I hope we don't lose sight of that. My other point is about a word in Extraction's root cause analysis document that made me sit up and take notice. In the section where Extraction is naming post-action items, number 1 is listed as mud gas separator flow lines modified for optimal flow rate, circulation, and maintenance cleanouts. Let me just say that again, modified for optimal performance. Why do you modify something for optimal performance? Because it's currently not optimal. Why was the machine not already operating at an optimal standard? How many other pivotal parts of this operation are suboptimal? Do we even know? When Extraction came to us years ago and asked us to invite them into our community, there were promises made that their operation was optimal. They called it best in class. I think some of you all remember that. And they made some comparison, I believe, to a Cadillac or something. They promised all of us that every system and process was optimal and seamless. In my optimistic heart, I believe this promise was why the city allowed this operation to be approved. But nothing about Extraction's operation has been optimal. The air filter fire was clearly not under optimal conditions. The worksite was deemed to be cluttered and unclean. The fracking fluid fire was another suboptimal condition. Human error, it seems, that someone didn't bleed the lines. And now another piece of machinery that was suboptimal and also caused by human error. Something needs to catch fire before we all realize that it's not suboptimal. We can't afford to let this suboptimal operator continue in our neighborhoods so close to our homes, schools, and recreation spaces. Let's see what we can do to make this never, ever, ever, ever happen again.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment in person? Next is public comment from individuals joining via phone. And please press *3, state your first name and last name and neighborhood for the record. First, we have Kristen Logan. Kristen, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. When we were going through the approval process for the MOU and CDP, many residents brought forward all sorts of concerns about how risks were being assessed and how this project was going to be managed. Fires were constituted as not high risk, meaning we were told that fires would be very rare if ever would happen. Traffic accidents, other things were elevated to high risk, saying death or injury, any type of damage would most likely happen from something outside the fire, explosion, or some major issue. We've seen 3 incidents involving fire in some capacity on these sites. All of the root cause analysis give different reasons. Oh, this got into this, or this we had a blockage here, or gas flow back here, and we didn't realize what is in the line. But truly, when you look at all 3 of these incidents, the root cause analysis, from what I can see, is the same. And I'm going to use 2 words: human error. Where is any corrective plans that is being put into place that is going to eliminate human error that is causing fires, which could cause explosions, which could cause other bigger issues on the site, that could cause fires to spread off the site and damage property, that could cause a loss of life? Why are we seeing the COGCC talk about this process being hard? I thought that this organization, along with our city, was supposed to do things to protect people, to put in protective measures, not to allow harm to continue to escalate and happen to a point where something catastrophic occurs. So I think that we're looking at this backwards. we need to be looking at this as the first obligation is to protect the public, to protect our property from these operations. And if we cannot stop human error from happening over and over again, when does this project stop? They've had 3 chances to correct the root cause analysis from these events. They've had 2 chances prior to this final event, and each one of these events have escalated and gotten larger and bigger. And we are still not seeing action on the root cause analysis of human error. So I ask that the COGCC and the city ensure these projects are stopped and these potential harms are taken away from our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Pat Dunn. Pat, you have 3 minutes.
Hi there. Good evening. I saw a picture of the huge plumes of black smoke from the fracking site in Broomfield. I'm always amazed when you can see huge black plumes of smoke. We're always told nothing to see here. There are no levels of any concern for public health. We all deserve to be safe and breathe clean air, not air that is fouled by 1 barrel of fracking fluid that could contain carcinogenic chemicals. This is precisely why fracking should not be anywhere near our communities. I'm from Aurora, Colorado, and I want to thank you very much for the privilege of your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to comment? Don't have anybody else online. Seeing none, we'll move on to council member questions and comments. Does any member of council have any comments or questions? Councilmember Anderson.
Thank you. So I want to start by noting that I appreciate that we're holding this meeting tonight. This is one of those issues where I just keep hearing from constituents. The concerns are very, very real. So this meeting is important, and I want to acknowledge and appreciate the work that North Metro has done, that our inspectors have done, Andrew and others. And this is. That's the one that's the one benefit that we have in this community, is that we have an excellent response. Like that is so appreciated. And I think we're coming to a really tough place here, because we were told that these operations, that they were going to be best in class, blue ribbon, best on shore. Like these are the things that were not supposed to happen. And now we're having to contend with that at the same time that we've just seen one of the worst possible wildfires we can imagine. And we live on open space, and these sites are on our open space and on open lands where the interchange site is their property, but it's also surrounded by grasses that I'm not sure how dry they are now, but when summer comes, they will certainly be dry. We're heading into wildfire season, knowing that even in December now you can have a wildfire. And that is the crux of what's happening here, is that we're seeing fires that we weren't supposed to see. So my questions were actually more for staff, and maybe it's even more just, I had submitted my questions ahead of time, so several have been answered, but I think the one that I keep hearing from constituents and that I really want to focus on is it's within the operator agreement and within the BMPs and within the CDP, that this was the effort that took months to go through, and the task force and the city council spent tons of time on, and staff did, and they came up with these. I printed some of the documents off here, so quick reference. We have when they did this section W, the alternative site analysis, Extraction agreed to do a risk analysis. It's right here in the document under 7.5, other negotiations between Extraction and Broomfield. It says third, Extraction agreed to additional BMPs that address Broomfield concerns not addressed in the BMPs already agreed to under both the Sovereign MOU and the Extraction Supplement MOU. These additional BMPs were as follows. I pointed out many times before this agreement was ever signed that number 6 was conduct a risk analysis. That was never done by Extraction, and Broomfield instead did a hazard. And one of the constituents noted that the hazard, it doesn't include fires in and under the medium or the high risk, and there were none of the highest level. So it's just showing that a fire wasn't supposed to be even of medium risk, it was supposed to be low risk. And then we have section R, the risk management plan. And in it, under 2.9, this is stated right from here, from this TDP, which is part of the agreement. Extraction agrees and acknowledges that risk management plan is a living document subject to change over time and in conjunction and collaboration with the city and county of Broomfield, and shall be reviewed and updated at least annually in connection with the annual review called for by the emergency response preparedness plan. And I asked about that updated plan, and we have not received an updated plan. So this document is supposed to be updated, and they agreed to it. And in the final letter of approval, the last letter that was sent that we're operating under is sent to extraction by then manager Charles Ozaki. It states in the risk management plan, extraction acknowledges its obligations to continually review mitigation activities, revise the risk management plan, and conduct safety reviews. If additional safety concerns arise, Broomfield reserves the right to impose additional safety measures consistent with the operating agreement and applicable laws. I mean, so that's one place to start. We're seeing risks that we didn't imagine. We're seeing fires, and I really want that to go back to where we fulfill this plan that was supposed to be done. And that's more of a concern for a staff if they want to address that at all, or maybe want to hold that for later. And that is my main question. Thank you.
What?
Yes,
Ms.
thank
Rogers?
thank you, Mayor. Staff is going to request an updated risk management plan. And every year, staff is involved with meetings on the tactical response plan, which actually has a lot of the emergency management plans, which ends up being a more practical on the ground tool that's used for these type of emergency situations. But staff will seek an update to the risk management plan, specifically citing the Marshall fires and the grassland concern.
Mayor, if I may, Mr. Valdez, would you provide a little bit more context on the conversations that you had thus far with extraction regarding?
Regarding the updates?
The requests to have the additional updates.
Yeah, no, and I think that's something we can certainly request. My understanding is the hazard are external hazards, like a Marshall fire type situation. And the tactical response plan is what happens if upset conditions occur on the pads. And fire is covered in tactical response plans, where they muster hot zones, cold zones, all that kind of stuff. But I think, I think the point is taken that, maybe this is a changing landscape, and fire, wildland fire, grassland fire is something that needs to be more actively considered. I think it's something we can do for sure.
And one follow-up question to that is, so then as we go through this section R, in every section, they go through the BMPs, and that with the use of these BMPs, rules, regulations, and other mitigating factors to expect the risk factors listed above to be minimized to near negligible. And so it'd be interesting I think it's more than just adding the risk, but keep seeing human error. That's a hard thing to mitigate. So the real question is for the extraction to put some thought into this, like how are we going to prevent the next fire from happening? And the next fire that could happen on a hot sunny day with a heavy wind and end up on our open space. That is that's really the crux of the matter here that needs to be addressed. And so I appreciate that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chief Ivey?
If I may.
Yeah, of course.
So as part of that annual review, we are working with extraction to update that TRP that we talked about to include grass fire, or basically what the Marshall fire was. It's a suburban conflagration. We've crafted some language. It's at extraction right now, and we imagine that that'll be formalized quickly.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all my questions for now.
All right, next we'll go to Councilmember Marsh Holston.
Sorry, Mayor, I'll leave my questions for the executive session discussion, or my comments, sorry. Thank you.
Well, it's not a hearing, so you can do either if you want to go, or you can wait.
Oh, wait, it's more appropriate for that point.
Okay, next
Thanks.
is Councilmember Lim.
Yes. Could someone clarify, maybe it would be the COGCC or our staff, what of the go forward actions were in place when the operations restarted on Sunday, March the 13th. There are 3 go forward actions. Increased maintenance, adding a monitor of the drilling mud retention lines, and adding a containment system. How many of those were in place when operations restarted on Sunday, March 13th?
Councilman, good question. All of them except the ecological containment system that was added after they finished the well that they were currently drilling on.
Okay. Why did the COGCC feel confident that the COGCC just expressed that they would not allow operations to go forward unless the root cause was completely understood and that mitigation measures were in place? So why did the COGCC decide to allow those operations to go forward on March 13th if all 3 of these go forward actions were not in place yet?
So Scott, I can help a little bit with that. The first portion of that is the elimination of the, and I'm going to get a little technical here, of the down tube in the gas buster. That elimination would eliminate the potential for plugging. The addition of the, and Andrew helped me a little bit, the environmental containment is just a secondary process if something else would plug off. It would be another catch system in the process. So it was not in the even in the original. So we're looking at replacing the original with an upgraded system.
Do you consider this to have uncovered a design flaw in the mud gas separator?
That's a tough question because there are across the nation, and I'll just use that across the nation, there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of these mud gas separators, all the way from the Permian Basin to North Dakota. It's not necessarily a design flaw. The flaw again was human error, not cleaning the cuttings out between wells. This improved design allows for a better opportunity to clean that out and maybe a reminder to do that.
I know a lot of residents have asked, does this happen often? That this human error of failing to do maintenance and causing a fire on a pad?
No, it does not. And just I've seen it happen. This is the second time I have seen it happen in the last 10 years.
Okay. So we've had 3 fires, which were somewhat related to human error.
So excuse me, I know of 2. What is the third?
Okay. Does staff want to answer that?
Hey, Mike, this was an event we didn't end up reporting to you, and neither did extraction. This was an air filter that caught fire on the ground. It was basically some debris that caught fire.
Okay.
It was not reported to COGC.
Yeah, and I did speak to extraction about that. So that was not a fire. So when we say 3 fires, that was somebody not changing an air filter and the engine smoked. So we've had 2, and both of the fires were contained within the combustors, which are designed to have fire in them. Albeit liquid did go to them and caused an inordinate amount of smoke. Only one of those, this last one on the interchange pad, had any equipment damage, and there was some minor damage to the combustor.
Okay, so is there anything in particular about the drilling operation they were doing at interchange that caused this situation? Because we've had drilling operations in Broomfield with extraction previously, and we will continue to. So you're telling us the only problem here was human error. There is nothing else that we can blame.
And that's correct. Had they cleaned out the bottom of that gas buster after the previous well, this wouldn't have happened. And then to alleviate that, they have improved on the design of the gas buster to help prevent future occurrences.
Okay, so is there any recourse when an operator obviously causes a fire by human error? I mean, does the COGCC ever seek a notice of violation because of those kind of failures on the part of the operator? Can you give me some perspective on why nothing was done here to follow up by the COGCC?
Well, first of all, we're not done with our review and analysis. I hesitate to speculate whether an NOAV, a notice of alleged violation, would be issued. Enforcement is a legal process that's very expensive. We have a very limited capacity, and we really try to focus our limited assets on getting the most effective responses. We have other operators out there who are not as responsive. We have differing levels of response from operators. And so we do have, we don't lack for enforcement opportunity. So we always want to make sure that we're judicial in how we use our enforcement asset. Given the nature and extent of this incident, it likely will not rise to the level of using that enforcement authority, but I have not completed my review of the incident, and so I don't want to say for certain one way or the other, but that's the perspective that I have to use when I deploy limited assets. Is how do I deploy my assets so that I can get the greatest effective use of those assets?
Okay, I would just encourage the COGCC to put this in the perspective of what we just discussed. This is the third incident. Mr. Leonard does not want to call the air filter smoking a fire. Okay, so but there's three incidents that seem to point to human error in some way on this pad. Two of them fires in the last 5 months, I think, since November. So, there is a pattern here. And you should not look at this incident in isolation, even though the incident itself, in any resident's estimation, is of great concern because of, as Councilmember Anderson said, because of what just approached us with the Marshall Fire in Broomfield. The fact that there's some discrepancy if the fire was outside the combustor or not. Extraction's root cause analysis now says that the flames were within and directly above and immediately outside the perimeter of the combustor. I mean, it was not contained inside the combustor, as Broomfield extraction seemed to change its story. On the Form 22, it stated that the product stayed inside the combustor, but the root cause analysis says otherwise now. It said it's outside the perimeter of the combustor. Extraction changed its story. And certainly the video and the photos from the residents show that that fire was outside of that combustor. So you should have an appreciation why the residents are so concerned that that fire with those chemicals on that pad could have spread way beyond that pad into the neighborhoods. As I recall, it has, of course, has no weight. The permits were approved, but as I recall, there was a commissioner when these permits were approved that said to extraction at the time of permitting, there is absolutely no room for error in these operations this close to the neighborhoods. And I remember that distinctly, and I hope the COGCC does. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted just to follow up on Councilmember Lynn's question about human error versus modifications. I was struck that we stated that the cause of this was human error and then immediately went to modifications of the equipment, which suggests it's a system flaw. And I didn't, and forgive me if I overlooked it, I didn't hear anything about training to correct human error. So did we modify it because the particular operators can't be trained to operate it properly? And did we modify, if this needed to be modified, does that not suggest other, I think it was gas busters would need to be modified on the other paths to increase safety?
Take that one, Councilmember Cohen. So the training bit is sort of addressed in the maintenance, what we talked about, you know, additional clean out, and then someone is going to be monitoring these things basically while they're running. And a point that we discussed early on that I'd like to make is it was set up as designed originally. This is a modification to allow for probably a better optimal flow. So with those countermeasures in place, it minimizes the risk of something similar happening. But
so it suggests there is a slight flaw to this particular equipment, which could lead to more fires. We're modifying this one, but not anything else. So we're teaming training. Training to me is different than maintenance. That's ongoing. But there's no requirement from COGC or any other regulator that these particular operators undergo training to ensure they don't do the same mistake again. That's not part of the corrective action.
If I may, yes, it is.
Okay.
So when
what kind of training do they get?
So in the subsequent accident report, they have to document to us what modifications, policies, procedures, practice, and training was implemented to prevent this this type of incident in the future. So that has to be.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That has to be documented on the. That's a condition of approval coming in on the subsequent accident report.
So at some point we'll receive a report to get the evidence of whatever training, the hours the personnel had to undertake. And would this be only these operators, or would it extend to other Civitas operators?
Well, that's a good question, because that is a condition of approval on this accident report.
I thought I saw something though that Civitas said that they were going to implement these changes throughout their operation. Andrew, is that not right?
that's correct.
So we can expect, excuse me, Civitas is modifying the other paths in a similar way.
Right. So, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, but the mud gas separator is a singular unit that's used during drilling. So they're only drilling one hole at a time, so that they'll move that through, and then it'll go through all the others.
The same operators. Yeah. The same operators will follow.
Yes, it's one operator, and they will have the same procedure for the rest of the drilling.
Can I also follow up? Excuse me. There was a question on frequency, and I was curious. The only report I could find about these kind of incidents was about from 2005 by the Colorado Department School of Public Health. which found there were 116 fires and explosions of oil and gas operations in the state over a 10-year period. And this covered about 53,000 active oil and gas wells in Colorado. We have maybe 50,000 now, I believe, slightly fewer. Overall, a small percentage, but I couldn't find anything more recent. You know, this doesn't include Creststones, Pad Fire, doesn't include the Frederick explosion. Is there any annual reporting from COGC or any other regulator of these kinds of incidents that the public can see broken down by operator?
I think that might be a question for you guys, Mike and Scott.
Sure. So we don't publish an annual report. However, all the information is public. It can be found on our database by going to data, image documents, and typing in accident reports. And all the submitted accident reports, are in that database. Other entities have searched that database. Obviously, you found the number. I think there's a more recent number. I want to say there was something even in the 2018, 2019 timeframe and I don't remember the group that found it.
So there's no annual report to review whether certain operators have higher rates of accidents or incidents than the other operator, that it would require the citizens to dig through your data to find that or make that correlation.
That's correct. We don't have a operator by operator breakdown.
I think in the interest of safety and public transparency, that's something the COGC should do, rather than put it on us to be data analysts and go through that dashboard. I really wish there was an annual report, not one done 10 years ago by the Colorado Public School. It helped really get a sense of that. I also wanted to follow up for that time. I believe the fire chief referenced TRP and they were adding language to what language? What kind of corrective language are we expecting?
TRP basically explains how we'll interact with extraction personnel in the case of an incident. That language is not finalized yet, hasn't been approved by extraction, but we have asked for the ability to request early shut-ins and other kind of mitigation efforts, extra mowing around the pad sites, which they have agreed to in discussions that we've had, and a few other things. That language should be completed soon.
Okay. Could you just, for my education, what is the fire suppression system on a pad? Generally?
There's generally, I'm not an expert on pad site fire suppression, other than they have a number of extinguishers. We prefer that they put small fires out while immediately activating 911, because we come with the fire suppression.
So they have fire extinguishers.
Fire extinguishers on
water system or any mechanical system set up?
No, not to my knowledge.
And I'm just curious, since, bear with me hypothetically, since we've had 2 or 3 incidents in a short period and we don't know exactly how that compares to other operators. You're the fire regulation enforcer. If my neighbor keeps having fires as a threat to me, what is the corrective action? Is it this, in this case, it's really up to COGC, not you.
Correct. We have no enforcement ability.
So the local fire really can't do anything if there's repeated fires or problems. It's up to COGC to act in this situation.
Yeah, I can't speak to who's responsible for it. We are not.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Next is Councilmember Leslie.
Thank you, Mayor. Scott, I really appreciated your points earlier about the cost and the time to try to take legal action against an extractor. And we're in the same boat here. We have minimal ability and authority to take that route. So the obvious best route is preventative. And so much of what my colleagues are asking are, what are the preventative measures that might be taken? to try to ensure that an extractor is doing all that he can to avoid human error, to avoid design flaws, et cetera. I'm assuming these burners have been around for many, many years. And to be honest with you, I'm somewhat surprised that they still emptied from the bottom for the very reason that we had this problem as a result of that, and that the fix was a very simple replumbing. My hope would be that there may be other issues that are as simple to fix, but for whatever reason haven't been fixed. So my question really is around, what are you able to do to help us help the extractor avoid human error problems in the future? I don't know what kind of regulations there may be for training or for testing or for evaluating. These systems are so complex, we know that. The fire issue now is such a dominant factor in all of our lives. And perhaps if that wasn't, if it wasn't for the Marshall Fire and perhaps some other of the grass fires in the last couple of years, sitting out on my deck watching the flames around Boulder, it can be extremely frightening. And that's what's happening. Our neighbors are scared. They're annoyed by the feeling that no one's doing anything. So I'm really kind of turning it over to you. Maybe not today is not the best time for a response, but we'd really like your help. How can avoid the legal side of things, but how can we make sure that the human error, that the design flaws, et cetera, are in fact taken care of, not one at a time, not at the result of an incident or two or three when something finally gets fixed, but if there's some kind of an investigative process that COCGC could do so that we could be given some assurance that the likelihood of a failure is further minimized. Going back and trying to sue them and trying to stop them, and we know this, that's very difficult and expensive. So we want to avoid that at all costs. So basically what I'm asking is your help. The fire chief just said, we're helpless in so many ways either. We're not looking for regulatory stuff here. We're looking for preventive maintenance, preventive care, preventive design, preventive training, et cetera, to make sure that these things don't happen again. I appreciate the response, but again, you may not have an ability to give a off the cuff one. You may want to think a little bit about it, and that would be fine for me. And I think for council as well.
Well, I'm happy to respond. I'll tell you how I look for trouble. I look for trouble when I see operators who are not responsive, who won't acknowledge that something's wrong or that they made a mistake. Those are the operators that I'm focused on. Those are where problems can get cataclysmic quickly. I'm less concerned when I see operators be responsive, take responsibility, and acknowledge that there was a mistake, that somebody didn't check the bottom of that gas buster. And I know that this is hard to hear from, from residents and from people who want nothing to go wrong. We all want nothing to go wrong. I live near these places too. We all do. The best preparation is just that. COGCC has a robust set of reviews and engineering review that these facilities have to go through. And I'll give you a for instance in terms of what I mean by responsiveness. We likely we didn't require the operator to make these plumbing changes. There's nothing wrong with the design of that gas buster. I know that will be hard to hear, but there's nothing wrong with the design of it. All equipment is designed to be operated in a certain way. And it's up to the humans involved in that process to follow the correct business procedures to use that equipment safely. We all know that when our 15-year-olds take over their driving permit, and we are scared to death because we understand that they don't yet fully appreciate the danger that they represent if they don't follow the good business practices of how you drive a vehicle. And so I'll just give you an example. I mean, to see it from my perspective, when I look for things that I feel like I need to spend my asset on, I would have let them return that gas buster to service with simply an acknowledgement that they had not checked it, that they were going to implement the training requirements to make sure that it was on their checklist of things to check, and return to service, because there's nothing wrong with the design of that equipment. Is the design that they came up with better? I believe so. Is the additional capacity of 55 barrels of storage between the gas buster and the flare, the combustion device, is that extra? Absolutely. And to me, and I'm not partisan here, I'm not for or against. I really do want to just try to make sure that I'm representing the public's interest in making sure that we are all safe, and that our environment is safe, and that our wildlife is protected. But both of those things represent to me extra measures that this operator is taking to try to demonstrate their commitment to try and not be a threat to their neighbors, or to at least minimize the threat that they are to the neighbors. And so that would be my best response, is to say, you try to prevent these things by building very robust permitting and engineering review processes that we do follow. And, and the operators don't want these incidents either, right? This is a very expensive thing that they just as soon not have to incur. It's not like this operator at least appears to me to be not trying to get away or to cut corners. And so I guess my best response is to say that, that's a trigger for me. If I see an operator who's not being responsive, or who's not acknowledging when they make a mistake, or that they did something wrong, or that they don't want to correct something when you bring it to their attention, that's where I focus first. And so I guess that's my best response, Council.
No, I appreciate that. I suspect, again, because there wasn't any dramatic outcome, if you will. But if a second Marshall Fire had resulted from this, I think we'd all be having a little different conversation right now about it. I know that, again, as I said earlier, this stuff is complex. I spent a good portion of my life in Houston and San Antonio working with oil and gas on the training side of things, on the process side of things, making sure that they knew and understood that mistakes can happen, and that there is a protocol to ensure these things don't happen. So clearly a protocol wasn't followed. Clearly that's something that needs to be corrected, and then it's taken care of. But where I'm raising is there may be other protocols that are not being followed. And to what extent is there conversation between the extractor and COCGC that says, look, we'll take a look at all your protocols, make sure nothing is being missed. And I'm hearing you say we have those things in place, but again, something got missed. And again, we say human error, but human error can be disastrous. So all we're looking for, I think, I'm only speaking for myself, obviously, but is some affirmation that, and I'm pleased to hear your comment about the responsiveness of the extractor, but we want is maybe even more robust conversations. Are you really on top of this? Are you really certain that these things, whether it's in this particular machinery or some other particular aspect of the drilling process, is not going to result in a major disaster? Because that's on the top of our minds right now. So anything you can do in that regard, sir, I think all of us here. The comment that one of our residents made a minute ago about, the equipment was supposed to be, world-class, fully operational, and it wasn't. Yeah, that happens. I know that, but this is so serious today, given the great risk that all all of us are aware of now, after 1,000 homes were lost. We need a bit more assurance that not just one extractor, but all of them, frankly, are doing everything they possibly can to prevent and not to fix after the damage has been done, after the incident has occurred. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Shah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to our oil and gas team here in Broomfield, and a big shout out to all of our inspectors. You all continue to carry a very heavy load for this community and continue to do great service for the Broomfield residents. So thank you. Thank you to our first responders as well, North Metro Fire Department, for being here tonight, continuing to engage with our citizens, engage with our council. Your presence is noticed. So thank you for being here. And of course, Broomfield Police for your continued response to these incidents as well, and continuing to be just a phone call away. Thank you to the members of the COGCC for joining us tonight and your willingness to engage in dialogue with us. It's very much appreciated. When we talk about the approval process of the CDP and the risk assessment, we talked a lot about the kind of X factor that was there throughout the entire documents, and that was human error. And we knew that there was no kind of assurance to eliminate any possibility of human error. There was just a lot of kind of safety measures that would help to limit that. But we always knew that that was kind of something that was hanging out there. And I think that this is why I continue to be especially concerned about residential fracking, is because this human error can cause such concern in nearby residents. This isn't an operation that's happening a great distance away. This is in close proximity. And so this is why there's that much more angst that exists even when small incidents happen. I'm thankful for my council colleagues providing an opportunity for the public to answer questions and hear from their elected officials, staff, first responders, and COGCC. I think that, with the recent experience of the Marshall Fire, our community is at a heightened state of alarm when it comes to fire. And so even when we talk about a small fire, there's a heightened sense of urgency. There's a heightened sense of alarm. When we start seeing smoke, we have no idea where it's going to go, where it's coming from. And I think that there's just this concern. And I'm sure that that you all are still, in that trauma of that Marshall Fire as well. So, just to kind of talk about that small fire, you all talked about it in terms of a surface area, 6 by 6. Do we account at all for the height of that fire when we're kind of labeling it as small fire? Because I think that was a concern that we heard from our residents, that we saw flames shooting over these 32-foot high walls.
Yeah, and I would guess because our responding personnel, who again were en route within about 2 minutes of the initial report, once we got it from dispatch, they did not see that flame. So I'm assuming it was just a one-time flame. As long as it's going up and it's not going out, there's really nothing you can catch on fire based on the location of that unit at that particular site.
And I have another question, a couple other questions for you. With the you mentioned response time in 2 minutes. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, we have residents in Skystone which they can get a response time in 2 minutes. So I'm very thankful that you all have the ability to respond so quickly. Are there any current concerns from North Metro Fire in terms of response times to any of the Civitas pad sites? Are there any foreseeable future outlying factors such as dry weather, extreme winds, very cold temperatures, street closures that would prevent or would affect North Metro Fire Department's rapid response to any of these well sites?
Well, like I noted, our Engine 66 is located right in the middle of this ring of their Civitas pad sites. So we're very well positioned for that first unit on scene. We have very robust mutual and automatic aid with our neighbors. I don't know if you know about the CAD project we're working on, but we'll be able to very quickly muster resources in a manner that we haven't been able to do in the past. In addition to that, we have a number of stations. I don't have the rundown, but our station 64, our station 62, we're able to get at any of those pad sites fairly quickly from a typical response standpoint. We're lucky enough to have some specialized equipment that we procured specifically for oil and gas incidents, some sophisticated air monitoring, that foam trailer that I spoke about earlier that has 660 gallons of foam on it, which when mixed with water becomes 22,000 gallons worth of foam if needed. So I feel, especially if you consider some of our partners to the northeast of us in Weld County, places like that, we're very well positioned for emergency response. I think Mike talked about our relationship with FRCC, which is now the CPRN, which is a group of industry individuals and first responders who work on emergency response issues. We've had some great work in the past in identifying phone caches and response best practices. So I think we're as well positioned as anybody in the state right now to handle incidents.
Thank you for that. And one more question for you, Chief Ivey. You had mentioned that there was some air monitoring that was done there at the site. Was that done by North Metro Fire Department?
Yes, we do our own air monitoring in addition to whatever's going on at the site. We trust our air monitoring, not that we don't trust theirs, but that's just a matter of best practice for the fire service. We make sure our stuff's calibrated, it's our equipment, it's checked every day. So whatever we get from site readings, we will double check with our own equipment.
And I didn't see the results of those air monitoring in our council memo. Have those results been provided to staff?
Yeah, they have. They were part of the report that I think was distributed to somebody on here. Everything was normal. No flammable gases, nothing like that.
That was going to be my last question for you. So thank you again for being here tonight. Sure. I have a couple questions for the COGCC. When we talk about fires and we talk about these noticeable events that occur on these pad sites, how frequent are fires expected to occur at these sites? I mean, is there kind of a frequency of we expect one per pad site, or is this something that's very limited?
I don't think that I can characterize in 35 plus years that I ever expect a fire. I know that may sound maudlin or naive, but you don't expect to have fires. You prepare for a fire, but you don't expect to have one ever. If you've gotten to the point where you're designing or operating things where you're expecting fires, you need to find something else to do. I don't mean to be cavalier, but that was the question you asked. Is I don't ever expect a fire.
No, I appreciate that, and thank you for that. The quick communication and correct communication has been an issue in these last two events. I'm curious from COGCC's perspective, from an outside perspective and being involved in events at oil and gas well sites, what have you seen to be effective communication during these events to the public?
I'll let Mike chime in. He's had way more experience, but I will tell you that emergency management practices this very well, and they are who we look to control the conversation, the information, the process. They train, they're prepared. We are there to assist them with technical information or insights into facilities that maybe if there's not an adequate operator representative. When we participate in that process, it's in a support role to make sure that they're getting the best information that they can to know how to manage that incident. So I would tell you that we look to the emergency management process to address that issue.
And if I could follow up just a little bit, as Chief Ivey mentioned with the CPRN and the training that we have done over the years, it's gotten much better. COGCC was early on was the liaison at incidents between the oil and gas industry and the fire service. And I say that because I was in the volunteer fire service for several years in a past life. And the two services, the industry and the fire service, don't always speak the same language. But with the training and interaction that has happened, especially in the DJ Basin, that language has become common. And there's a better understanding of what needs to be done.
I appreciate that, and I really, heard that last line, that the kind of the way in which we communicate and the words that we use to communicate aren't always lining up. So I appreciate that kind of note of caution. And then a few questions for staff. So with the we saw the mitigation measures that are being laid out. I always have former council members' voice in my head when we look at solutions and we talk about unintended consequences. So I'm curious, are there unintended consequences with this solution mitigation measure that has been put forth? And is it possible that we could have just a larger event created with a greater amount of combustible material now closer to, what was the cause of the fire?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I followed your question.
And yeah, I mean, and I don't know if this was for Broomfield staff or for COGCC.
Yeah, I think I meant it more for Broomfield staff.
Okay.
Okay. Well, and Andrew, I can help you if you want. The idea here is to provide the improved mitigation or the mitigation of the equipment was, I can't think of a good analogy, but to provide a better flow as the cuttings come in, they can fall out and go to the outlet easier without potentially plugging off, if that makes sense. I'm trying to think of a quick analogy, but I can't right now.
I think Broomfield staff has a response as well. Thank you.
Can you please repeat your question so I answer it correctly?
Yeah, definitely. So, when we're looking at the mitigation measure that has been kind of made in terms of the gas buster, and then we see the added tank that is going to be there to collect, the amount of liquid, right? It's liquid material. Is it possible that we could just be creating a larger event with a greater amount of combustible material next to what the source of the fire was?
That's a good question. I don't believe so, because that second vessel that they put out there, the containment, that should, again, never have a fluid in it. So it's now a fail-safe. So if the same thing were to happen again, and the drilling fluid happened to go into that gas line, it's now going to go to that other vessel, which has another separator in it, in essentially. So once that vessel, if it were to happen again, there's an alarm system on that, and it would go off and send up an alarm that there's now liquid in the second container. So we're not creating a bigger problem. Hopefully, worst case scenario, even if that second vessel would have it, wouldn't be a bigger problem. It would be the same side problem.
Great, thank you so much. And again, thank you to all the stakeholders, partners that are here in attendance tonight. Thank you. That's all I have, Mayor.
Mayor, if I could just add quickly, so Councilmember Schaaf, one of the difficulties with unintended consequences are just that, right? If we can anticipate the consequences, then they wouldn't fall into that category. So just going on record, when our inspectors say we don't believe that the modifications that the operators made aren't going to make it worse, it's an opinion based on experience and not what could happen in the future.
Thank you. Councilmember Lindstedt.
Thank you, Mayor. My comments actually aren't very dissimilar from Councilmember Schaaf's. I actually just wanted to start by profusely thanking North Metro Fire for their very proactive, engaged conversation with the public for being here tonight. And 2 weeks ago, we had a town hall in Skystone with about 70 Broomfield residents and had Q&A for about 2 hours on mitigation efforts about the grasslands surrounding Skystone. So I just want to thank you for coming out tonight and for answering all these questions. It's really, really important. And I see you and value you being here to help answer those questions for council and for the public in all the ways that you guys do. My next comment was just to staff. You know, we've had dozens of questions over the last 2 weeks or since this fire on the dashboard, on email, from the public, from council members. And I just want to thank you guys for all that work. It's a ton of work to answer those questions, and they're not easy things to do. And now we're here tonight having a meeting and repeating many of those same questions and answering them again for the public. So I appreciate that and very, very much. The last thing I'll say, just to the CODCC, you know, while you can't expect, or maybe you don't expect or anticipate fires, you know, they're clearly happening here. And I think Broomfield as a whole, you know, from this project is a perfect example of why this type of residential fracking does not belong anywhere near homes. You know, as best as we can to try to mitigate these problems, we're having health impacts, we're having fires, we're having a plethora of problems. And, you know, unfortunately, you know, the city signed a contract to allow this to happen. And that's where we are. So I just hope the COGCC, as we have them here, are listening to the concerns that our residents are facing from this project when they're considering approvals of similar projects in the future, because it really doesn't belong in residential areas. So those are my only comments, Mayor. Thank you. And I appreciate everyone being here tonight on this unscheduled meeting. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to start by echoing the comments you just heard from Councilmember Lickstead. I agree with everything that you just mentioned. My takeaway tonight, I just have 2 quick questions, probably for staff. You may or may not want to answer them, or someone else. So my takeaway is that there was a small fire, is what I'm hearing. It's caused by human error, and there's a concern that our residents have that, you know, human error will cause additional fires in the future, ones that may be more, you know, devastating and a lot larger than what we saw this past few weeks. Knowing that we can never fully eliminate human error, it's just virtually impossible. The questions that came to my head were, you know, has Civitas taken all measures to prevent human error from escalating a small fire to something that would be much larger? And my other question is the concern that the residents have of a fire escalating into something larger, is that realistic? Is that a realistic possibility, or is this something that we shouldn't be, you know, wasting our time on?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Andrew, answer the first one.
Yeah.
And I'll answer the second one.
Okay. I mean, okay. So the first question, you know, we don't speak for extraction, right? We observe and monitor and report and ensure compliance. This go forward plan makes sense. It makes sense to us. Our engineers make sense to COGCC, and we all agree that it'll minimize risk. Have they done everything? You know, I can certainly ask, but I wouldn't want to speak to them.
And I guess it would be more from the opinion, professional opinion from our staff or anyone else that's out there as to whether they, you know, from what you've seen, have they done everything?
Mayor Pro Tem, so I'm going to roll that into the first part of your second question. Staff used to answer those questions, and it is fraught with peril. Because what is realistic or idealistic, or you know, a wish list versus a what is, we are not in that position to indicate if they're doing everything to their best of their ability. What I can say is that we are doing everything to the best of our ability to enforce the operators agreement, which, and Councilmember Linsat, just one clarification. The reason we signed the contract is because we didn't have a choice. This was pre-Senate Bill 181. But again, every member that's on the dais right now and the staff members that are here operating under extreme conditions to enforce that operators agreement to the very best of our ability. We do it every day, all day. And when I say every day, I mean every day to hold them accountable. Are they doing what their operations to their best of their ability? I don't know. We can't speak to that. COGCC has been a good partner. I think the outcome of COGCC's listening and hearing and taking into account the data from operations being in residential. We saw it two weeks ago for the first time, a permit was denied based on information and data that was supplied by Broomfield. So we're going to continue to do our very best. And that's where we are.
Thank you. I have nothing else. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I do have to agree. I know that our oil and gas team has risen to the occasion every time. They're doing their very best. I know North Metro Fire is doing their very best, and we appreciate all of you. But the fact remains that this could have been avoided by extraction, Civitas, had they performed the necessary maintenance, right? So that's a failure to maintain their operation. And I guess my question is to the COGCC, why isn't there a penalty for failure to perform necessary maintenance, such as braden head testing and monitoring? That comes with a penalty if it's not performed on a regular basis, because that determines the wellhead integrity, correct?
Were you looking to me?
Oh, either one, either you or Mr. Leonard.
That's correct. The difficulty, everything you said is correct. The difficulty is in implementing that penalty. We don't have fining authority. Like when you get a traffic ticket, you know, the officer can issue you a fine right there. They can issue you a penalty. You can prepay it and reduce the cost, or you can go to court and try to debate it and get it. But it's a penalty that's invoked right there. No state agency, no administrative agent for the state has that kind of authority except the law enforcement authorities. If I want to seek a penalty for your failure to comply with a permit condition, there is a legal process that is an adjudicative process where everybody lawyers up and we present the evidence, and there either the defense or there's not a defense. It depends on how the operator postures. But that's what I was talking about earlier in terms of my enforcement asset. If I could issue a fine, I probably would, right? I probably would as a deterrent. And I guess the other thing that I would just offer is, you know, the difficulty with relying upon robust business processes to do anything in life is that you're only as good as your attention right now, right? Your attention lapses for a second and you blow through a red light and the consequences are severe. It's the same we all face. And clearly on this day, at this moment, their attention span, their focus lapsed. and they had a fire. And I fully support Broomfield, and I fully support our inspectors reinforcing for the operator the absolute necessity to not let your focus lapse. Because when you do, there's a potential for bad things to happen. And so I think this is great that you continue to raise the level of awareness that your expectations, as our expectations, are for this to be done safely. And so I applaud you for that. And I guess I also would just want to try to provide some maybe third level or a fresh set of eyes perspective. I believe Broomfield City Council recognizes you have a robust and competent staff. And I just want to acknowledge that for you. Not every local government has the robust asset that you have that are diligently interfacing with this industry to promote the safest possible results. And so I just want to applaud their efforts and thank them as well for their partnership in this process. And so that would be my response.
Thank you so much, Mr. Cuthbertson. Is that how you say it? I'll just call you Scott. So I guess I really appreciate you explaining the process of, using your assets, because we know that extraction was fined high six figures for failure to perform the brain pad monitoring. So was that one of those higher, more critical things to enforce? And so you had to go through the legal process to find them?
Yes, that would be a good example.
All right, well, thank you so much. That clears it up for me. And I'm going to go around and do a second round of questions and comments, starting with Councilmember Lim. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I heard conflicting information that I wanted to get clear while all the parties were present. I thought I heard the COGCC say that it would be North Metro's responsibility to make the call on if there was still a hazardous situation that prohibited operations from going forward. And then I thought I heard later North Metro say that only COGCC can ask the operator to pause operations until things are determined to be safe. Did I misunderstand that cross there? Or could someone explain that while the parties are here?
Yeah, and I could, and Chief, if you want to jump in. So and let's use a worst case scenario. Had there been a fatality or a serious injury, then, and there have to be a fire investigation, or the cause of the fire was not readily attainable, then North Metro, I believe, would have the ability to shut down the operations until they had exercised everything they need to do, till they release that facility. And Chief, if I'm wrong, go ahead and jump in and tell me I'm wrong.
No, I think my answer was a question was whether we had general enforcement powers on pad sites, which we do not. Certainly, if we had a major event at a pad site, we work with our partners, CCOB, the people in the oil and gas department, COGCC. It obviously would be a big deal at that point.
Yes, and so, Councilor Lim, there's 3 touch points to this that I tried to allude to. If once there's an emergency incident, the emergency management has control of that scene until they deem it appropriate for them to release it, period. We all comply with their directions until they deem the site is in a safe condition and represents no threat, and they've completed all of the investigation that they feel like they need to do their job. Once they release the site back to the operator also has to meet any OSHA restrictions that might apply from an OSHA inspection. They also have to meet our restrictions before they can return to operation. Our restrictions generally, in this kind of an incident, we were able to get there pretty quickly because it was a very easily ascertainable cause. that was readily fixed and quickly fixed. And so that's why the return to operation was quick. But as Mike said, that's not always the case. You know, there are 3 different agencies who are looking at what goes on these sites, and all 3 agencies have to release the site back to the operator for a restart before they're allowed to restart.
Okay, thank you for that. I had a specific question for North Metro. Have you discussed with Extraction whether Extraction should try to attempt to put out a fire on the pad of their own wherewithal, or should they be calling North Metro immediately? Have you had that discussion? And do you know what protocol they're following? Did they call you immediately instead of trying to put out this fire on their own?
Yeah, I can tell you, as we sat down together in partnership with the city and with the city and county and with Extraction, that was one of the things that we pointed out in the TRP, that tactical response plan, is that if it's a small fire and you can handle it, someone gets an extinguisher and gets to work on it while someone else is calling 911. They've been instructed, it's part of the TRP, that they must make immediate emergency contact through 911 for any fire on site. And that's written into our agreement.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Anderson?
Thank you. And I should have asked this question at the beginning of this meeting, you know, understanding that we're out here trying to solve a problem that's on a pad that none of us created. And the onus of this really needs to go to Extraction on the gas to make sure no further human error occurs. And I know we all know that, but I really think we need to acknowledge that. So I have a question for staff. Was Extraction or Civitas invited here tonight? And did they? Obviously, did not come.
Councilmember Anderson, so we're in communication with them daily. I think it's an open, extended invitation. Why they would attend is probably why they're not here.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And I think just, I don't know if you can answer this. This is for, I guess this is for Scott or Mike. And just input, is there, from all your years of experience, is there any way to mitigate human error? Is that more just training? Would that be the answer on that one? Or we're continuing to see human error, and how you mitigate that is troubling me.
So I know we're talking about we're talking about 2 different entities here. We're talking about Civitas and we're talking about the drilling contractor, both of which have robust safety programs. I know they go over many things every day. They change of operations require job safety analysis, job hazardous analysis, and things like that. As Scott mentioned before, you know, driving through a red light, how do you stop human error? And that's what we're looking from Civitas is there now a checklist that at the end of a well that line is cleaned out? That's part of that's part of that documentation at the end. But the question of how, I really wish I could answer, how do we get rid of human error? I don't know, but I think we use incidents, smaller incidents as learning experiences. I really don't know how to answer your question other than that.
No, that's helpful, and that's about as good as I thought. That we can, because it's helpful information, so it's really tough to mitigate it. So I just want to say that this risk management plan that is supposed to be updated annually when new risks become available, which we are seeing, That would be extraction's opportunity to show that they are taking the risk seriously and are willing to do the analysis required to ensure that, as they indicate over and over again in the risk management plan, that these risks will be near negligible. And then with the Form 22 that states that fire was within the combustor, that would be amended, correct? And
so there's so we have a requirement in our rules in the 600 series rules 602 that COGCC is notified within 6 hours, verbally, email, some contact to COGCC within 6 hours of the incident. I was notified within an hour, and I have a good working relationship with many operators out there. They know if they have a fire, they need to be calling me or one of the supervisors right away. Then they have 3 days to submit an initial accident report, and many times the initial accident report does not necessarily have the actual root cause. And I'm going to lean back on Chief Bybee again, because root cause can be very difficult at times to determine. When the initial comes in, I am the one that reviews the initial accident report, and I will put a condition of approval, typically put a condition of approval that a root cause, and it's typically within 60 days, must be supplied, plus documentation of any practices, policies, training, anything of that sort. We want to know what was implemented to prevent future occurrences. So there's an initial and a subsequent accident report for each event, unless the root cause is given in the initial, which in some cases the root cause can be given in the initial incident report.
Okay, thank you. And then just one quick clarification earlier. I think there was we're talking about the filter fire. There was actually 2 different filter instances. One was recently with a clogged filter on a frac engine that but it was just a few days ago, there was significant smoke. It turned out to be, I believe that was a clogged filter, but there was also on November 9th, there was actually a small fire that for 15 seconds that they put out on site. That was the one, and that had followed on the heels of a November 8th incident where extraction oil and gas had a significant fire. I would call it significant. It was 3 separators caught fire on the adjuster pad near Berthoud. I think that was where the elevated concerns over the fire were coming from. So this isn't just happening in Broomfield. And that is all of, you can respond if you want, but that was
I couldn't hear you very well because of the echo. I wasn't I'm not sure of the incidents. If you want to send something to me in an email, I can sort them out. We were notified of the fuel filter incident. Okay, that really, that's not a fire. That's an engine improperly running and smoking. So
we can send you the November 8th event. And it's really, I just want to clarify that. I think that's really confusion. Maybe that's helpful to come.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to clarify that. Just send me somebody send me something and I'll sort it out for you.
All right, thank you.
We'll send you a list of all the extraction fires, not just in Broomfield. Next, we'll go to Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to leave my comments for the later, but I decided to jump in right now. I don't really have any questions, but I just want to echo some other comments that I've heard previously. Thanking the COGCC for coming out and talking to us, and North Metro for their quick response and all of this, and especially for staff. I don't think there's anybody on the dais or remote that would approve this project right now if it came before us right now. But the reality is that we are stuck with it, and we are stuck with very few legal options to stop it. We could try, but it would probably, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars in damages if we did. So I want to thank staff for the hard work you do every day dealing with all of this mess that we have put on you and the hard work that you do. And I want to thank everybody for coming out today and the residents who spoke. If it was my way, there would be no fracking in Colorado. It's just something that is dangerous and shouldn't be anywhere near residents or anywhere for that matter. but we have to do the best we can with what we have. And I completely understand the concerns of the residents and the fear that this has caused, especially with the Marshall Fire coming so close to us before. It was just a fluke that the wind died down and that we didn't get hit more than we did. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and thank staff for their work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council comments or questions? All right, well, again, yes, we would like to extend our gratitude to both of you from the COGCC for joining us tonight to help answer some questions, and our North Metro Fire Department chiefs for being here as well, and of course, our never tirelessly working oil and gas team. I know you have a really difficult job, and we appreciate you. So the next matter of business this evening is council's consideration of a request for an executive session. This request is for council to move into an executive session following this meeting for the purpose of obtaining legal advice related to the March 12, 2022 fire at the interchange A pad. Will the clerk please read agenda item 4B by title?
4B, request for executive session for legal advice related to March 12, 2022. Fire at the interchange A pad.
Thank you. We'll now proceed with public comments. If there's anyone who'd like to comment on this agenda item, please step up to the podium. We'll start with in-person first. And I don't see any online. Does any member of council have comments on this agenda item? Before I ask the city and county attorney to read the recommended motion, I want to remind council that my council to go into executive session requires a 2/3 vote of the quorum present. Will the city and county attorney please read that motion?
That an executive session be held immediately following this vote for the purpose of providing legal advice related to the March 12, 2022 fire at the interchange A pad as permitted by 24/6/402 4B of the Colorado Revised Statutes.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Councilmember Anderson?
So moved.
Is there a second? Councilmember Ward?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Councilmember Marshall-Shin?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to oppose this vote tonight. I have no problem with going executive sessions when they're necessary, but I feel like on this issue, we have gotten a plethora of legal advice from our attorney's office and the hard work they have done. And I don't believe there's anything additional that we need tonight to give us any resources. So I don't believe it's an adequate use of our time or the staff's time. So I'm going to oppose this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Lindstedt?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm also going to oppose this motion tonight. I think we received ample and sufficient information from our staff and from legal. I don't see any reason for us to go behind closed doors and discuss this. So thanks.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem?
Ditto.
Okay, anyone else? Councilmember Lim?
Yes, I support this motion because I believe that there are unanswered questions as far as what recourse we can take to petition the COGCC or seek further information from extraction.
Thank you. Councilmember Shah? Or no comment? Anyone else? All right, so will the clerk please call the roll?
Anderson,
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Hinkle, Wisniewski,
No.
Leslie,
No.
Lim,
Yes.
Lindstedt,
No.
Marshall-Shin,
No.
Shaq,
Yes.
Ward,
Yes.
That passes 5-4. Council has approved the request to move into an executive session. Is that right now? 2/3 of the.
My numbers were 6-3. Mayor? Was it 5-4?
5-4.
We need 6. We need 2/3 to approve, 2/3 of the quorum present to go into
You don't
exec
have to vote.
session. You don't have. to.
And I only vote in a tie,
Correct.
so I can't vote.
Correct.
I would vote for it, but I can't vote. So then council has not approved the request to move into executive session. So that concludes the items on this evening's agenda. Is there any other business to come before council? There being no further business, the special meeting of the Broomfield City Council is adjourned.